For decades, one interview has haunted Woody Allen's legacy. In 1992, cameras captured him making claims that sound impossible today. He talked about death threats, showed disturbing evidence, and used one phrase over and over. But something about his calm tone while discussing such serious accusations felt wrong. The interview was supposed to clear his name. Instead, it raised more questions than answers. The true story of what he did to her daughter is far darker than anyone imagined. Woody Allen was born Alan Stewart Konigsberg on November 30th, 1935, and grew up in Brooklyn's Midwood neighborhood. His father worked as a jewelry engraver and waiter, while his mother kept the books at her family's delicatessen. His parents' relationship was tense, and his own bond with his mother was strained. The family spoke German, Hebrew, and Yiddish, carrying the heritage of grandparents from Austria and Lithuania. As a boy, he loved baseball and was always chosen first for games. He also developed a passion for magic tricks and the clarinet, hobbies he has kept for decades. At 15, while still at Midwood High School, he was earning $200 a week writing jokes for newspaper columnists like Earl Wilson and Ed Sullivan. This was over 3 times the average weekly wage in 1950, and more than both his parents made together. His first printed joke poked fun at restaurant prices being over people's salaries. Discovered by press agent Dave Alber, he began producing 30 to 40 gags a day, commuting by subway from Brooklyn to Manhattan after school to deliver them. At 17, he legally changed his name to Haywood Allen, later shortening it to Woody Allen. It was more than a name change, it was a reinvention. He was shifting from an anonymous Brooklyn kid into a rising Manhattan comedy writer. Soon, he was working on scripts for television alongside Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, and Neil Simon. Allen's television credits quickly piled up. He wrote for The Ed Sullivan Show, The Tonight Show, Sid Caesar Specials, Candid Camera, and the Pat Boone Chevy Showroom. His work habits were intense. Dick Cavett said he could sit at a typewriter from morning until sunset, stopping only for coffee. Around the same time, he began contributing humor pieces to The New Yorker, a move that gave him literary prestige while he continued to cash large television paychecks. His magazine pieces would later be collected in 3 successful books. In 1960, Woody Allen walked away from a steady $1,500 a job as a television writer and stepped onto the small stage at the Duplex Club in Greenwich Village. Shelley Berman introduced him that night as a young writer, performing his own material. Instead of the usual punchline-heavy act, Allen delivered rambling monologues that sounded like nervous confessions. They were drawn from his own anxieties, awkward romances, and self-conscious intellectual habits. The approach felt fresh, even if some television hosts found it too urbane for Middle America. Dick Cavett gave him one of his most comfortable TV platforms because they shared the same quick wit and background. Allen went on to appear on shows hosted by Mike Douglas, Merv Griffin, David Frost, and Johnny Carson, slowly building a presence as a performer as well as a writer. The success of his live act led to his first comedy album, recorded at Mr. Kelly's in Chicago in 1964. Simply titled Woody Allen, it was praised by Billboard for being hilarious from start to finish. The following year, the album earned him a Grammy nomination for Best Comedy Performance. He went on to release 2 more albums, Volume 2 in 1965, and a third that completed his stand-up trilogy. The nomination placed him alongside names like Bob Newhart, Lenny Bruce, Mort Saul, and Cosby, confirming that he could hold his own among the biggest comedians of the decade. When Allen moved into film, his first Hollywood experience was a lesson in frustration. He wrote the script for What's New Pussycat, which was meant for Warren Beatty, but casting changes and constant rewrites by Peter O'Toole, Peter Sellers, and the director turned it into something completely different. Filmed in Paris and French chateau between October 1964 and January 1965, the chaotic sex farce bore little resemblance to his original vision. Allen played a strip club dresser who earned 20 francs a week and complained it was all he could afford. The movie grossed $18.8 million domestically, ranking 10th for the year, but the experience convinced him never to let someone else direct his scripts again. That promise shaped his directorial debut in 1969 with Take the Money and Run, a low-budget mockumentary about a hopelessly incompetent bank robber named Virgil Starkwell. One of its most memorable moments came when Virgil carved a bar of soap into the shape of a gun, painted it with shoe polish, and watched it melt in the rain during his escape. Filmed partly in San Quentin State Prison, it earned him Golden Laurel nominations for Male Comedy Performance and Male New Face. The style he used in this film would influence later comedies like Airplane and the Naked Gun series. By then, his on-screen persona had solidified into the nervous, overthinking, self-doubting intellectual that would define much of his career. He insisted it was nothing like his real self, but it resonated so strongly that even Freud.org.uk offered a course on the psychoanalytic themes in his films. This character was always stuck between lofty thoughts and petty fears, often sabotaging his own happiness while obsessing over life's smallest details. The early 1970s brought a run of hits that established him as a bankable director. Bananas in 1971 and Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex in 1972 were made for about $2 million each and grossed over $18 million domestically. The latter briefly knocked Deliverance from its 7-week hold at number 1. Time magazine put him on its cover, and Diane Keaton starred in films that dominated the box office for 12 consecutive weeks. Not everyone approved. David Rubin, who wrote the original book, called the film a sexual tragedy and disliked its approach. In 1973, Sleeper marked the height of his slapstick work, and in 1975, Love and Death proved he could blend absurdist comedy with philosophical satire. The latter was described as if it had been made by Ingmar Bergman and the Marx Brothers working together. These films kept the one-liners and sight gags of classic American slapstick, while layering in deeper themes that hinted at where his work would go next. Annie Hall's release in 1977 marked a turning point in Woody Allen's career. At the 50th Academy Awards on April 3, 1978, it took home 4 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Actress for Diane Keaton. It earned over $38 million in North America, making it Allen's 4th highest grosser at the time. What made this so remarkable was that it beat Star Wars for Best Picture, a film that had already become a cultural giant and had won 6 technical awards that same night. Allen became one of the rare directors to win Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Original Screenplay in a single year. The authenticity between Allen and Keaton on screen came from a real relationship that lasted 3 years in the early 1970s. They met in 1968, when Keaton was 22 and struggling to find work. She later admitted she was crazy about him and worked hard to become his girlfriend. Allen initially described her as blank and compared her to a coat-check girl. Their relationship was rocky, ending when Allen told her that living with her was like walking on eggshells. He based Annie Hall directly on her, even using her real last name. After the breakup, he dated both of her sisters, yet they remained close friends. That personal history gave their on-screen romance a depth and familiarity that audiences could feel. 2 years later came Manhattan, shot entirely in black and white and framed in widescreen by cinematographer Gordon Willis. The opening montage of New York City, set to George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, became iconic. The film grossed nearly $40 million and was shot in famous locations like the 59th Street Bridge, where Alan and Diane Keaton's characters share an early morning scene that remains one of his most famous images. It blended the charm of Annie Hall with the seriousness of interiors. In 2001, the Library of Congress chose it for preservation, recognizing its cultural and artistic importance. Alan's choice to shoot in black and white was a deliberate nod to classic Hollywood and a way to make the city look timeless. Hannah and Her Sisters in 1986 became Alan's biggest box office hit for many years, earning $40 million in North America. It won 3 Oscars, including Best Original Screenplay for Alan, Best Supporting Actor for Michael Caine, and Best Supporting Actress for Diane Wiest. The film's structure was unusually complex, weaving together multiple storylines over 2 years and 3 Thanksgiving dinners. Alan gave himself only a small role, showing confidence in the material and the cast, which included Max von Sydow and Carrie Fisher. Critics continue to see it as one of his most balanced works, perfectly blending comedy with drama. From 1982 onward, Alan maintained an unmatched pace, making one film every year for decades. Between 1965 and the early 1980s, he missed only 5 years, and sometimes he released 2 films in the same year. By the mid-1980s, he had directed more than 15 films in just 20 years. His budgets were modest, usually under $20 million, and his shoots lasted 6 to 8 weeks. As soon as one film was finished, he would begin writing the next. This steady rhythm allowed him to take creative risks without the pressure of making each film a career-defining event. In 1978, Interiors shocked audiences by removing all traces of comedy. Its muted colors, quiet dialogue, and heavy themes drew direct comparisons to Ingmar Bergman's work. Critics saw deliberate echoes of cries and whispers, from the beach scenes to the symmetrical dinner shots. While some admired the bold shift, others felt it was too close to imitation. Still, it signaled that Alan wanted to explore new territory. Stardust Memories in 1980 pushed the self-reflection further. Shot in black and white, it followed a director frustrated that audiences preferred his earlier comedies. Critics were divided, and the box office underperformed. Yet it earned a Writers Guild nomination, and later found defenders who saw it as a daring response to Interiors' reception. In 1989, Crimes and Misdemeanors stunned critics with its mix of humor and a dark murder plot. Judah Rosenthal, an ophthalmologist, has his mistress killed and discovers he can live with the guilt. In contrast, filmmaker Cliff Stern upholds moral ideals yet suffers professional humiliation. The ending offered no justice, sparking debates in philosophy courses about whether morality matters if evil thrives. Woody Allen was only 20 when he married 17-year-old Harlene Rosen at the Hollywood Hawaiian Hotel in March 1956. At the time, he was still selling jokes to Manhattan tabloids and earning far less than $40,000 in total assets. The marriage lasted 6 years and ended in 1962, but not before it gave Allen one of his earliest scandals. By 1959, they were drifting apart, and Allen began using their troubles as material for his stand-up routines. On television, he once joked about her assault in a way that prompted her to sue him for $1 million. That case ended quietly, yet it left him with a sarcastic nickname for Rosen that he repeated in recordings for years. The episode showed how he would mine private pain for public laughs, a habit that would follow him through his career. In February 1966, Allen married actress Louise Lasser just one day after finishing the final cut of his film What's Up, Tiger Lily. Lasser became both his partner and his on-screen muse, starring in several of his movies during their 4-year marriage. Their relationship was turbulent, with the strain spilling into the public eye years later. In June 1976, Lasser was arrested in Beverly Hills with cocaine after refusing to hand over a dollhouse worth a fraction of the legal trouble it caused her. The tabloids linked the incident to her struggles after the marriage. Even after their divorce, Allen continued to cast her, keeping ex-partners close in both life and work. Allen's most unusual relationship began in 1980 with Mia Farrow. They lived only 90 meters apart on opposite sides of Central Park West, each keeping a separate apartment. They co-parented 3 children and collaborated on 13 films in just 7 years, releasing them at a pace of nearly 1 every 9 months. Their lives were carefully scheduled, with 2 nannies moving between both homes so Allen could keep to his 16-hour writing days. That arrangement collapsed in July 1992 when Farrow discovered intimate Polaroids of her adopted daughter, Soon-Yi Previn, in Allen's apartment. The fallout would cost over $7.5 million in legal fees and become one of the most public scandals of the decade. Between 1985 and 1987, their family had grown quickly. Farrow adopted Dylan in July 1985 when the child was 14 months old. In December 1987, she gave birth to Satchel Ronan, and Allen co-adopted Moses that same month. Adoption papers for Dylan and Moses were signed by Allen in December 1991, just weeks before his affair with Soon-Yi began. During Ronan's first year, Allen spent only 19 days with him due to back-to-back film shoots. Years later, Ronan's investigative journalism would revisit that family history, making those rare early visits a subject of renewed scrutiny. On 1st of December 1991, Allen began a relationship with Soon-Yi, then 21, and in her first semester at university. They had spoken little before 1990, when he began giving her rides to school after she injured her ankle. Their shared outings to Knicks games led to a closer bond. Allen later claimed he felt no conflict because he had never acted as her father. 6 weeks later, on 13th of January 1992, Farrow found the Polaroids that ended their 12-year partnership. She finished work on Husbands and Wives before the story broke, but the discovery left Hollywood stunned. The tensions escalated in August 1992 when Dylan, then 7, accused Allen of abuse during a visit to Farrow's Connecticut home. The police opened an investigation within 2 days, and a state attorney later said there was probable cause to prosecute, though no charges were filed. Allen denied the allegations, accusing Farrow of using them to punish him. In early 1993, Connecticut police turned to Yale New Haven Hospital's respected child sexual abuse clinic to determine if Dylan Farrow's story could be trusted. Over the course of 9 interviews, the clinic's 3-member team examined every detail. In March, they delivered a 60-page report clearing Woody Allen of abuse. They wrote that Dylan's account felt rehearsed, possibly coached by Mia Farrow. But there was an unsettling twist. The clinic had destroyed all original interview notes, keeping only a polished summary. They insisted it was standard privacy policy, yet Justice Elliot Wilk later called it sanitized evidence. The official conclusion was still no abuse, but the missing notes meant doubt never disappeared. The custody battle that followed lasted nearly a year, filling almost 2,000 pages of court records. On 7th of June 1993, the judge ruled against Allen, granting Farrow full custody and limiting him to supervised visits. The decision criticized his behavior as grossly inappropriate and damaging to Dylan. Appeals in 1994 and 1995 failed, closing one of the most highly publicized family disputes in American entertainment. Woody Allen had almost never spoken on live television, which made his 60 Minutes interview on 22 November 1992 feel like an event. It lasted 15 minutes and 22 seconds, much longer than most segments. The cameras rolled less than 4 months after Dylan Farrow first spoke to police on 4th August 1992, so the case was still open. Producers Victoria Gordon and L. Franklin Devine even let him show papers and photos on screen, something usually reserved for whistleblowers. Steve Kroft opened by reminding viewers that both parents were famous faces from the movies, which turned a private custody battle into something the whole country watched. For many, it was the first time they heard Allen speak outside a film, and his calm tone while discussing such serious accusations made it even more striking. Throughout the interview, Allen repeated the phrase, "a total non-event," insisting that nothing happened with Dylan. Business Insider later called it one of his most forceful public denials. He mentioned that he had passed a police polygraph, though he didn't share the numbers, and cited a Yale New Haven hospital report that he claimed found no credible evidence of abuse. By refusing to admit to even the smallest mistake, he made the issue a choice between complete innocence or a made-up story. He described it as one coached statement by a 7-year-old. Legal experts later noted that such a blunt denial leaves no space for settlements, but it made a sharp soundbite that shaped headlines. Allen also claimed that Mia Farrow threatened his life after discovering his relationship with Soon Yi. He said she called him late at night saying she would have me killed and stick my eyes out, which she linked to a Greek tragedy she was reading. One call at 4 a.m., he said, left him on edge until morning. Family therapist Dr. Susan Coates testified in March 1993 that she had warned Allen about Farrow's words. He said, "The threats began the day Farrow found nude photos of Soon Yi and became almost daily by late July 1992. Whether those calls were meant literally or not, their graphic detail made the custody fight sound more like a crime thriller than a breakup." The interview's most unsettling moment came when Allen held up a Valentine Farrow had allegedly given him on 14th of February, 1992. It was an old-fashioned card covered with family photos, stabbed with sewing needles, with a steak knife driven through the heart. He said he opened it in his car and sat frozen for several minutes before driving away. The segment also showed a note Farrow posted on Dylan's birthday that read, "Child molester at birthday party. Molded, then abused one sister, now focused on youngest sister." Allen ended by framing the allegation as a question of logic. He said it would be illogical to abuse Dylan during a public custody battle when the house was full of nannies, babysitters, and children. He pointed out that nanny Christy Grotek testified she lost sight of Dylan for only 15 to 20 minutes on 4th of August 1992. So any crime would have had to happen in that short window. He added that if he were the predator Farrow claimed, he had 11 years when no one was watching and never acted. By setting out the timeline this way, he invited viewers to see it as a matter of probability. The smaller the opportunity, the less likely the act. In February 2014, Dylan Farrow broke a silence that had lasted more than 2 decades. She was 28 when she wrote a 1,000-word letter for the New York Times blog, describing in plain but unsettling detail what she said happened when she was 7. She recalled being taken to a small attic crawl space in Connecticut, where Woody Allen assaulted her while she played with a toy train. She even remembered the color of the train's engine. The post went live in the afternoon, and within a single day, it had over 2 million views. Comments poured in so quickly, the Times had to close the section after hitting its daily limit. This was years before the Me Too movement, yet the letter would later be seen as one of its early sparks. 6 days later, Allen responded with a lengthy rebuttal, but public opinion had already shifted. A poll taken 10 days after the letter showed that nearly half of Americans now believed her story, a sharp rise from the numbers recorded in 2003. On January 18, 2018, Gayle King aired Dylan Farrow's first television interview on CBS this morning. Producers paired her live reactions with clips from Allen's 1992 60 Minutes denial. When the old footage showed Allen insisting, "I would never harm my child," Farrow gasped and wiped away tears. The segment lasted 13 minutes, but CBS received 120,000 viewer emails in the next 2 days. Nielsen overnight ratings showed a 31% jump over the show's weekly average. Minutes after it aired, Mira Sorvino apologized to Farrow on Twitter, becoming the first of Allen's collaborators to publicly recant on national television. On February 21, 2021, HBO premiered Allen vs. Farrow, a 4-part documentary series. The opening episode had 0.394 million live viewers, HBO's biggest multi-episode doc debut since 2019, and crossed 3 million viewers within a week on streaming. The filmmakers spent 3 years digging into sealed court records and revealed Mia Farrow's 1992 camcorder tape, showing a distraught Dylan describing the attic incident. It also disclosed that Yale New Haven Hospital's original investigative notes, once cited by Allen's defense, were destroyed after only summary pages were filed, leading legal scholars to call the case forensically tainted. The series included excerpts from Allen's own 2020 memoir audiobook, letting his rebuttals play in full, yet 82% of Rotten Tomatoes critics called the series persuasive. It went on to earn 7 Emmy nominations, including Outstanding Documentary Series. Between October 2017 and January 2018, Allen faced a wave of public rejection from actors. Kate Winslet, who had promoted his film Wonder Wheel, later admitted she regretted working with him. Greta Gerwig told the New York Times she was embarrassed by her role in To Rome with Love. On January 16, 2018, Timothée Chalamet announced he would donate his entire $180,000 salary from A Rainy Day in New York to Time's Up, Rain, and the LGBT Center. Within a week, Rebecca Hall and Michael Caine made similar statements. By March, Variety counted at least 14 Oscar-winning or nominated actors who had distanced themselves from him. In 2019, his 50-year streak of releasing a film every year ended when Amazon shelved A Rainy Day in New York in the United States. In March 2020, Grand Central Publishing quietly acquired Allen's memoir, Apropos of Nothing, for an April 7th release. The news leaked on March 2nd, and 2 days later, Ronan Farrow criticized the move. On March 5th, more than 100 Hachette employees staged a walkout in New York and Boston, chanting, "Drop Allen." By the next day, Hachette gave up the rights and issued a public apology. The book was picked up by Arcade Publishing and released on March 23, 2020, during the COVID-19 lockdown. Its first print run was 75,000 copies, far below Hachette's planned 200,000. It debuted at number 13 on Amazon that week, boosted by Curiosity purchases, but dropped out of the top 100 within a month. It showed how protest could bring both heightened attention and a quick decline for a controversial voice.